By the way, on the separate issue of the shutdown, we're now in our 24th day. It's easily a record right now, and it could go on for quite a while. The question is, how long of a while? Pennsylvania Republican Congressman Mike Kelly with us. Congressman, very good to have you.
Thank you, Neil. Good to be with you.
All right, so this is dragging on. The president rejecting an idea by fellow Republican Lindsey Graham to sort of call things off for a 3-week cooling off period, reopen the government, and by then, if things are not making progress, do the emergency declaration. What do you think of that? The president dismissed it, but what do you think?
Yeah, well, I think if you're at the president's position and you're looking across the table with people that don't want to negotiate at any level, what would taking 3 weeks off do to encourage that to happen? I think more than anything else, it would embolden people to say, look, we'll get to this later on. But this is a time where we always say we'll get to it later on, and we never get to it. So it's a good time to draw your lines where you are right now, and let's get to a final decision.
You know, what's interesting is both sides, I always think, Congressmen, are closer than they state. The same Democrats dismissing the wall had just written off on about 130 miles of such wall building under Barack Obama.
Right.
And the same, Republicans, for example, who are bemoaning intransigence out of Democrats, had themselves been very flexible on comprehensive immigration reform in the past. So I wonder if cooler heads will prevail, or is that just out the window?
You know what? I mean, cooler heads would be nice to see right now, but as you know, everything in this time is political. It doesn't have as much to do with policy as it should have. I just think that if you were to look at the history of this whole issue, there's been overwhelming support for this on both sides of the aisle. It has never become an impasse until all of a sudden it's the president's signature piece. This is about 2020.
The wall has in polls, right? The wall is hardly ringingly endorsed by most Americans who don't see the need or the urgency for it. They might be wrong to your point. They might be not getting it to the president's point. But is that what hurts him? And does that even hurt the declaration of an emergency to get it?
Well, when it comes to a declaration of emergency, that's something up to the president to decide. I was at a pro-life breakfast in Erie, Pennsylvania on Saturday morning, about 20 degrees, over almost 550 people, not counting the children, at that breakfast, all to talk about the importance of the pro-life issue. After that breakfast, people came up to me and said, Congressman, stand tough, stand strong, tell the president to stand his ground. We are tired of waiting for something to happen on the border to protect American citizens.
Well, that's a friendly
and when I hear
district,
that from
right?
people,
I mean, that's your district, and that's natural. Well, I understand that, but it's not typical, right?
Well, it's not typical of who they poll, but it's typical, I think, of the American people. You know, these polls are very selective, as you know, and depending on what the question is how people answer. I would just tell you that for most of us...
In retrospect, Congress, do you think it's worth shutting the government down? However passionate you feel about it, the president feels about it, what's to stop a future, let's say, Democratic president doing the same for a climate change measure, shutting the government down for that?
Well, I think that now we're comparing apples and oranges here. This is, if you look to the past, there was a Democrat president that said, let's not have that type of border protection. My question is now, is the real problem that this is Donald Trump's policy, or is the real problem that we think this is an immorality at our borders, not to have a sovereign state and be able to protect our own borders? To me, it's so common sense, Neil, but there's nothing less common in Washington, D.C. than common sense.
All right, Congressman, thank you very, very much. We'll see how all of this goes.